One network saw a commander defending his fleet. Another saw sailors denied basics. This is Parallax Newsroom. NBC framed Trump's effort as a bid to block an award, while the Dispatch called it a reconsideration request. The Supreme Court declined to overturn a $5 million verdict against Donald Trump stemming from the E. Jean Carroll defamation case. NBC News emphasized the word latest, signaling a pattern of failed legal maneuvers. The Associated Press used, again, rebuffs, reinforcing the same repeated failure narrative. The Washington Times specified the underlying nature of the suit, naming it a defamation lawsuit, and noting the court, again, rejects the appeal. The Read, the word doing the heaviest lifting across all three is again, which every outlet deploys to frame this as a losing streak rather than an isolated ruling. NBC's choice of bid to block casts Trump as the aggressor pursuing a financial shield. The Washington Times' inclusion of defamation is editorially significant because it reminds readers the verdict concerns speech, not assault, which matters to Trump's political base. The Dispatch, alone among right-leaning sources, filed a second piece about a ballroom dispute reaching the court, burying the Carroll loss amid other litigation. What is verifiable is the court's refusal. What is spin is the adjective selection, which quietly tells the reader how many times is too many. NPR quoted Senator Mark Kelly saying Lincoln sailors cannot get basic needs met, while Breitbart called that misrepresentation. President Trump dismissed a reporter's question about deteriorating conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, labeling the reporting as fake. NPR centered Senator Kelly's account of unmet basic needs and mental health strain. The Associated Press and The Hill both focused on Trump's dismissal and his clash with a CNN reporter. Breitbart led with Senator Kelly admitting he had not looked at the data, positioning the criticism as premature. The Read, the fault line here is proximity. NPR and CNN foreground the sailors' lived experience, using phrases like "feel the strain" and quoting a senator's direct claim about basic needs. Breitbart inverts the frame entirely, leading with Kelly's concession that he had not reviewed the data, which reframes the senator's concern as an admission of ignorance rather than advocacy. The Associated Press and The Hill occupy the middle, but their decision to lead with Trump's reaction rather than the sailors' conditions means the president's denial becomes the story's spine. What is verifiable is that deployment lengths have stretched. What is spin is whether a senator needs data before he is allowed to voice concern, and whether a president's dismissal erases the underlying problem. MSNBC remembered Panettiere for her television roles, while the New York Post opened with her father's grief. Actress Hayden Panettiere died at age 36, a fact confirmed by multiple outlets. MSNBC and NPR used nearly identical framing, identifying her by the shows she anchored, Heroes and Nashville. The New York Post bypassed her career entirely in its headline, instead reporting Neighbors, accounts that her father was just beginning to recover from the 2023 death of her younger brother. The Read, coverage here converged on the bare facts, but diverged sharply on which tragedy to center. MSNBC and NPR chose a career-first obituary frame, which is the standard convention for an actress of her profile. The New York Post made a deliberate editorial choice to lead with familial grief, linking her death to her brother's prior passing and sourcing it to Neighbors, which is a softer attribution than a family statement. No outlet named a cause of death, which is standard pending an official report. But the Post's framing implies a narrative of compounded family loss before any medical examiner has weighed in. What is verifiable is her age and her credits. What is spin is the editorial decision about which loss deserves the headline. NPR named Gomez a Democratic representative under investigation, while the Washington Times specified alleged conduct with a House staffer. The House Ethics Committee opened a probe into Representative Jimmy Gomez over sexual misconduct allegations involving a staffer. NPR and Axios both led with the committee's action and the phrase, "sexual misconduct allegations." The Washington Times used the phrase, "alleged sexual conduct with a House staffer," which is more specific about the nature of the relationship. NPR included his party affiliation in the headline. Axios and the Washington Times did not. The Read, party identification is the quiet variable here. NPR's decision to label Gomez a Democrat in the headline follows a convention. Some outlets apply only when the politician's party is not the majority, while Axios and the Washington Times omit it, relying on readers to know or look it up. The Washington Times phrase, sexual conduct, drops the word misconduct, replacing it with alleged, which technically covers the same legal ground but reads as more clinical and less condemnatory than NPR's sexual misconduct. What is verifiable is that the Ethics Committee has acknowledged an investigation. What is spin is the choice between misconduct and conduct, and whether a party label belongs in the first sentence a reader sees. Across all 4 stories, the agreed facts rarely moved the needle. The framing did, and the smallest word choices carried the heaviest load. Subscribe for the framing gap.